Picture this for a moment. You're going through your day exactly as usual. Maybe you're sipping your morning coffee, scrolling mindlessly through your phone, stuck in traffic on the same gray road you've driven 100 times before. Everything feels predictable, familiar, safe. And then, without warning, something shifts. It's not a voice booming from the sky. It's not an angel appearing in your living room. It's smaller, quieter, almost unnoticeable. A sudden wave of awareness rises in your chest. A flicker of thought slips into your mind. Why does this all feel so unreal? Maybe you're at a family dinner, laughing at the same old jokes, but inside you feel like a stranger in your own life. Maybe you're sitting at your desk, typing the same reports you've written for years, when suddenly you wonder, is this really it? Is this what I came here for? Or maybe it's just a whisper, softer than breath, telling you you were meant for more than this. It doesn't fit the moment. It doesn't make logical sense, but it feels real. Most people dismiss it. They call it stress. They blame it on boredom, exhaustion, or overthinking. They distract themselves with noise, more scrolling, more busyness. But deep down, you know this wasn't random. This wasn't just another thought. It was a message, a crack in the wall of ordinary life. And through that crack, light begins to pour. You see, people love to talk about spiritual signs, repeating numbers, vivid dreams, heightened sensitivity. And yes, those things happen. But this subtle shift, this sudden knowing that something about your life doesn't match who you really are, this is the one sign that matters most. Because hidden inside that whisper is the seed of transformation. Ignore it, and the walls of your old life will eventually feel like a cage. Listen to it, and everything you thought was solid begins to move. This sign never arrives with fanfare. It slips in quietly during the most ordinary moments, as if the universe is testing whether you'll notice. And the moment you feel it, you can't quite go back to who you were. Because once you sense that your life isn't meant to stay the same, no amount of distraction will silence it for long. So let me ask you, have you ever felt it? That strange distance from your own routine, that whisper that doesn't belong to the moment you're in. If you have, pay attention, because that whisper is not random. It's the first and most important sign of awakening, and ignoring it is the greatest mistake you could make. When this sign arrives, it doesn't show up like a passing mood. It doesn't feel like one of those random thoughts that comes and goes with stress or fatigue. No, this one is different. It carries a weight you can't shake off. Something inside you knows, without words, without evidence, that your life as it is cannot remain the same. It's not a thought you borrowed from a book. It's not an idea planted by a video. It's a knowing, quiet, steady, undeniable. At first, it can feel confusing. Outwardly, everything might seem fine. You've got a job or roof over your head, maybe even success by society standards. Friends and family might look at you and think, why would you want anything different? You should be happy. But deep down, you feel the gap widening between the life you're living and the life your soul came here to live. And that gap refuses to close, no matter how much gratitude you practice, no matter how hard you try to convince yourself that what you have is enough. That's why this sign is so easy to ignore. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. You're functioning, you're showing up, you're doing what's expected. But the whisper inside keeps tugging, keeps reminding you that comfort isn't the same as alignment. Stability isn't the same as truth. You know with a clarity that doesn't fade that something about your life needs to shift, even if you can't name what it is yet. And here's what makes this knowing so powerful. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the right time. It simply arrives, and once it does, nothing feels the same. You can distract yourself for a while, bury it in work, drown it in entertainment, numb it with routine, but eventually the knowing breaks through. Like water seeping through cracks in stone, it finds its way back, stronger each time. Have you ever noticed that once this feeling shows up, you can't unknow it? You can't return to the same old life and feel satisfied the way you once did. You can't pretend that the roles you've been playing are enough, because in that moment your soul has spoken, and once the soul speaks, the truth lingers until you listen. So if you felt this quiet, steady pull, this deep certainty that life is calling you somewhere new, don't dismiss it. Don't call it stress or boredom. Recognize it for what it is, the single most important sign of awakening. The moment you acknowledge it, everything begins to shift. Here's the strange paradox. The most important sign of awakening doesn't come with lightning bolts or booming voices. It doesn't arrive in the middle of a crisis when everything is falling apart. Sometimes it shows up in the middle of calm, when life looks perfectly fine on the surface. That's why so many people dismiss it. They tell themselves, I should be happy, I should be grateful, nothing's wrong. And because nothing looks broken, they convince themselves that the whisper in their chest is nothing more than boredom, anxiety, or fatigue.
Think about it. If you had this feeling while going through heartbreak or losing a job, you'd probably take it seriously. You'd assume the discomfort was pointing to change. But when it shows up while your life is stable, while everyone around you thinks you've made it, it feels easier to ignore. You tell yourself, it's just a phase, I'll get over it. You try to drown it in distractions, longer work hours, endless scrolling, another project, another purchase. But the knowing doesn't leave. It lingers quietly in the background, waiting for you to acknowledge it. This is what makes the sign so subtle and so dangerous. It doesn't demand your attention. It doesn't shake you awake in the beginning. It starts as a tap on the shoulder, as if the universe is gently asking, are you listening? And most people shrug it off. They keep walking. They keep repeating the same routines. They keep smiling for the world while secretly feeling an emptiness they can't explain. And here's the truth. The longer you ignore it, the louder it becomes. What begins as a whisper grows into restlessness. Restlessness grows into frustration. Frustration grows into collapse. That's why so many people only awaken after life has stripped them of everything familiar, because they refuse to listen when the voice was still soft. Maybe this has already happened to you. Maybe you've felt the tug in quiet moments but brushed it aside. Maybe you've convinced yourself that gratitude should silence it, that being comfortable should be enough. But here's what you need to know. Gratitude doesn't erase your calling, and comfort doesn't replace alignment. If you feel the whisper, it's not an accident. It's your soul knocking, asking if you're ready to open the door. So the next time you feel that subtle dissonance, that strange sense that life doesn't quite fit, don't dismiss it. Don't call it nothing. Because that nothing might be the most important invitation you'll ever receive. Every whisper carries a choice. You can acknowledge it or you can bury it. And here's the hard truth. The longer you bury it, the heavier the cost becomes. At first, it only shows up as restlessness. You lie awake at night, unable to explain why you feel unsatisfied. You go through your days like a machine, checking boxes, but each task feels hollow. You laugh at the right moments, say the right words, but behind your smile, there's a quiet ache you can't put into language. Ignore it longer, and the ache deepens. The things that once brought you joy feel flat. Hobbies lose their spark. Achievements feel meaningless. Even relationships begin to feel distant, as if you're acting in a play rather than living your life. You keep trying to convince yourself, I should be grateful. Other people would kill to have what I have. But gratitude doesn't silence the emptiness. It only makes you feel guilty for having it. Push it down even further, and life will start to intervene. The whisper becomes a nudge. The nudge becomes a shove. The universe has a way of raising the volume until you pay attention. A job suddenly falls apart. A relationship crumbles. Your body begins to break down under the weight of stress you can no longer ignore. From the outside, it looks like crisis. But in truth, it's simply the voice of your soul refusing to let you live a life that isn't yours. I once heard someone say, if you don't listen to the whispers, you'll have to listen to the screams. And that's exactly what happens. Many people wait until they are forced, until collapse strips away the distractions, before they finally admit what they've known all along. This isn't it. This was never enough. But here's the tragedy. It doesn't have to get that far. You don't have to wait for your world to burn down before you honor the sign. You don't have to lose everything before you say yes to yourself. The cost of ignoring is steep, but the invitation has always been simple. Listen early. Listen when it's still a whisper. So if you've been feeling that subtle pull and telling yourself, "I'll deal with it later," remember this. Later often comes as collapse. And collapse is just the universe doing for you what you wouldn't do for yourself. Tearing down the life that no longer fits so you can finally step into the one that does. The moment you finally stop running from the whisper and turn toward it, everything begins to shift. Not always in dramatic ways at first. Sometimes it's subtle, like the air itself feels different, like life is moving pieces around in the background. But once you acknowledge the sign, the entire rhythm of your reality changes. You start to notice synchronicities, those coincidences that don't feel random anymore. The numbers on the clock repeat. A stranger says the exact words you needed to hear. A book falls into your lap as if it was written just for you. You overhear a conversation that answers a question you never asked out loud. Suddenly, the universe feels alive again, responsive, guiding, almost playful in the way it drops breadcrumbs along your path. Relationships shift too. Some people begin to fade, not because you reject them, but because your energy no longer fits where it once did. At the same time, new connections appear, souls who resonate with the frequency you're growing into. You'll meet people who inspire you instead of draining you, who see you without explanation, who remind you that you're not walking this path alone. Your inner world also transforms. That restless ache you carried doesn't vanish overnight, but it begins to soften. Instead of emptiness, you feel space. Instead of anxiety, you feel curiosity. Instead of being trapped in the old question, "What's wrong with me?" you begin to ask a new one, "What's being born through me?" That single shift in perspective turns fear into fuel. And here's the most surprising part. You don't suddenly become someone else. Awakening isn't about replacing yourself with a new identity. It's about uncovering what was always there. The voice that told you there's more than this was never trying to pull you away from yourself. It was calling you back to yourself. When you listen, you realize you weren't broken, you were misaligned. And as alignment returns, life feels lighter, freer, more authentic. This doesn't mean the path is free of challenges. In fact, challenges often increase because they are part of the clearing. But now, instead of feeling like punishment, you recognize them as signs of growth. Every closed door feels less like rejection and more like redirection. Every ending carries the whisper of a new beginning. So if you've ever wondered, what happens if I listen, this is it. Life begins to conspire with you instead of against you. Your world rearranges not because you forced it, but because you finally said yes. And that yes is the key that unlocks the next chapter. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you are standing at a doorway. On one side is the life you've always known, the routines, the roles, the expectations that kept you safe but small. On the other side is the unknown, a path without a clear map, but one filled with alignment, truth, and freedom. The whisper inside you is not random. It is the key that unlocks that door. The question is simple. Will you walk through? Here's what you need to understand. If you choose to ignore it, the doorway doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits in the silence of sleepless nights. It waits in the restlessness that no distraction can numb. It waits until the moment you're finally ready to admit, this isn't it. I was made for more.
But every step of delay comes at a cost, and the longer you resist, the louder life will push back. But if you choose to listen, if you choose to step through, the world begins to shift in ways you never imagined. You start saying no to what drains you, yes to what scares you but excites you, and slowly the weight you've carried for years falls away. You realize that the life you thought you were losing was never really yours. It was borrowed, built on expectations and illusions. What you gain in return is not a new self, but the true self that was hidden beneath the noise all along. And this is the paradox of awakening. The whisper feels small, but its power is infinite. It looks like a subtle thought, but it is the seed of transformation. Ignore it, and you will circle the same loops year after year. Honor it, and you begin to live a life guided not by fear, but by alignment. A life that doesn't just happen to you, but flows through you. So let me ask you, have you felt it? That pull in your chest, that quiet certainty that you're meant for more. If you have, don't dismiss it, don't drown it out, because this may not just be another video. This may be the very sign you've been waiting for.
And if this message reached you today, trust that it wasn't by accident. Share your experience in the comments, because your story might be the exact reminder someone else needs to hear. And if you want to keep walking this path together, subscribe so you never miss the guidance that could meet you at the exact moment you need it most. The journey doesn't end here. In fact, this is only the beginning.